world?
What's up, Christian? How are you this week?
Oh, this is a good week.
Good week.
Money's flowing. Good week collecting. I'm gonna get paid, so that's always nice. Weather's nice, things like that. So yeah, got some good prospects too. So yeah,
good stuff, guys. Just quick FYI, I'm not feeling great. So again, if I shuffle around my seat a lot, it's not you, it's me. But we are ready to rock and roll this week. Today we're going to talk about a lot of the unfortunate recent events in the news. Many of which have. Hey, Tanya, how you doing? Say hi as you guys come on in. Welcome aboard. Unfortunately, today, and I want to warn everybody beforehand, if you are the type of person who is easily injured by other humans getting hurt, because unfortunately, that's kind of what we're talking about today. It is truly disappointing, truly heartbreaking. Some of the things that are going on, and the reason we need to talk about it is because it's just so vitally important to understand the way that the media portrays these and what the elites want you to think and the way that this all goes down in the news. So we're going to talk about, I think, like 5 or 6 or 7 or 8 or 10 different incidents. I'm sorry, Tanya.
Yeah, I mean, there's so many. We'll talk about the ones that are most disturbing to people. But yeah, let's talk about it.
Indeed. So let's start with the Governor Shapiro had his house firebombed, right? And so I guess somebody came up and just started torching his house. That threw a Molotov cocktail. Now I want you guys to remember this Molotov cocktail theme, because it's going to be something that's repeated over and over again. And I'm going to ask you something about it a little bit later. But yes, the guy uses a Molotov cocktail to light the governor's house on fire. And so, of course, he's got to get up in the middle of the night, rush his family out. And this is ironic to me because Governor Shapiro is pretty far to the left. Right? So no, this Angela asked, did this happen this week? No, this was actually I believe in April. So yeah, but so he's pretty far to the left. So out of all the targets, and now he is Jewish Jewish heritage, right? So there is the obvious motivation there. But out of all the targets to choose, he's probably one that's relatively sympathetic to, trying to get to the Palestinian cause, perhaps because there's a little bit of a ideological crossover there in the left and the Palestinians. So I was stunned to hear about this. I'm like, why, out of all the people in the world, would they target him? And then, of course, fast forward a month, and you had 2 Israeli embassy workers get gunned down right outside of a museum.
Yeah.
Which is insane. Like, again, just so brazen, so ridiculously, and each time
just for their identity, not for doing anything.
Right. They've done nothing.
Antagonistic. Yeah.
Right. We don't even know what their politics were. We have no idea who they are, right? It's just like 2 random people have to lose their lives because of something so heartbreaking. And each time, by the way, somebody's the suspect that's taken into custody is like no remorse, right? Zero remorse. Says, I'm glad I did it. This was to free Palestine, or this is for Gaza, or what do you say? I did it for Palestine. I did it for Gaza. The guy who firebombed Governor Shapiro's house said, this is for treatment of Palestinians. And I just have to ask, is this really something that is going to further their cause? And then, of course, just recently we had the Boulder, Colorado terror event, which a guy dresses up as a gardener and then assaults a protest and starts throwing Molotov cocktails, and he has some kind of makeshift flamethrower or something. And it really, just like you said, Queen, it's not safe anywhere.
Just because he perceived that they were pro-Israel,
right?
Because they wanted the Israeli hostages to be released, which is an end to the conflict. That could be they want peace, and he's still attacking them. Like the hatred is still.
It's insane. And here's my issue, the biggest issue that I'm running into with all this, because I can go, I mean, we could keep going down these incidents. I mean, I could tell you about, the people who burned Tesla down, and people who were like, let's see, the George Floyd Black Lives Matter riots, and again with Molotov cocktails very frequently, and the Tesla also with Molotov cocktails. And I mean, we could just go down the line. And there's two things that come to mind. Number one, why does it seem like there isn't a very strong opposition to this kind of stuff? Like, why does it seem like at least until Trump took over? Now, Trump is a little bit faster on the draw, but at least until Trump took over, it feels like we're really slow to respond, and it feels like everything in the news gets downplayed, right? Like, and just to give you an example, like, if somebody in the right, does something, some crazy neo-Nazi or something does something stupid, it is front page everywhere.
And immediately. Why his motivations, what his political activations were.
Exactly. Like, yeah, what he voted last year, how much money he donated to Trump's, whatever. And but on the left, it's like hidden. It's like, oh, these were a bunch of mostly peaceful protests, is the words they use.
Right. We don't want to. It's like we want to be slow and wait till we learn more. Like they hide the propaganda, especially like some of this trans violence on the left too.
Yeah.
Right. So the media is carrying water for them because the media, well, maybe not journalists per se, but media, especially commentary and other people, have created a culture that is accepting the violence against the right by the left. They've created this, and they don't want to take responsibility for it. Right? They don't want to condone. They don't want to condemn it right away because they know that the rhetoric has created this, but they don't want to. So they're slow. They want to somehow deflect. Hopefully, by the time they can talk about that this person was really radicalized on the left, it won't be a big news story anymore. They can put it on the fourth page and bury it.
Right? Exactly. Yeah. So Dinosaur asked a great question. So what's the difference between, what is considered protest as opposed to riots? It's a different opinion depending on which way you lean. So as far as I am under the impression of, protest is just perfectly protected constitutional right. Anybody has a right to assembly as long as you're doing it in a public space. You're not just running up on somebody's private property, and that's a protest. Now it becomes a riot the moment anybody engages in any violence or vandalism or breaks the law, basically.
Civil disobedience. So one of the things is, like, a lot of times if you're going to have a big gathering, you can get a permit for your protest, right? So the police are there to protect you. So you're allowed to protest. If it's a small gathering, you can just stand on the street with your signs, anytime. But if you have a lot of people coming, usually you want to let the police know. But if you start disrupting traffic, breaking windows, disrupting businesses, destroying property, right? That's a riot. That's where you're not in control of what the group is doing.
Exactly. Yeah. And then the next layer of like verbiage is used nowadays is an insurrection, right? So and of course it's only applied to the right, and it's only applied.
Insurrection is against the government usually.
Yes. Right. But my point here is that the Black Lives Matter riots engaged government at least 3 or 4 different points, right? Like they firebombed the White House. They basically took control of Portland for a certain amount of time. They attacked federal officers, so these were all disruptions of federal proceedings
Minnesota and Ferguson were just,
And so, right. So like if we apply the term to one side, we ought to apply the term to the other side. Or I think both of them are better characterized as riots. Like I thought the January 6th event was just a riot. I thought most of the Black Lives Matter riots were riots. I didn't think we even needed to go to that next level. But of course, they just want to come up with the word that's just scarier or, more ferocious. Sounds as bad as they can to characterize the right. And you notice that like nobody really talks about the Black Lives Matter riots anymore unless they're like bringing them up to counter the January 6th riot, which is still brought up to this day. It's like you almost can't say anything to a liberal without them bringing it up. It's like, well, what about January 6th? Like, what about January 6th? You're like, all right, well, okay, but everybody does. This is a human trait, not a right wing.
So I think yes, the left, right, felt like that Donald Trump, especially in his first term and now in his second term, represents this existential threat, and so stuff that they would be opposed to, i.e., violence, now is they consider it appropriate. They've given at least tacit, if not explicit, approval for this type of thing, and cheerleading it, and so one of the things is especially so is their inability to appreciate and understand Middle Easterners and their relationship to violence, which is very different from people who've grown up in the West, grown up bougie. We're sort of a nonviolent, understated. You know, we get our culture from the Queen here, who's very understated. Arabs are very demonstrative, right? They wear their emotions very openly, and their emotional reaction, right, to things related to Israel and the Middle East is very different from ours. I mean, it's more of an intellectual feel like it's important for human rights or for Western rights or to support Israel, but for them it's very emotional, sort of personal connection, because even if they lived their whole life in America, they still feel like Arab, right? The Middle East they have this very passionate connection to it, and and so yes, they're very easily things that you could say that would not incite people in America to violence will incite violence there. Let's just say the trigger is a little bit more sensitive to that.
Absolutely.
And right, they're attacking people, right, for merely just wanting to release the hostages. Violent attack. Oh, these people are openly associated with the Israeli state. Violent attack. This person is in government and has a Jewish identity. Violent attack, right? Right. So what happens, right? This is why it's not helping their case, right? Islamic violence, what ends up happening is people will try to not aggravate them, right? I don't want them to come attack my home.
Right.
But you don't trust them and respect them, right?
Right.
And it's sort of like an angry toddler or even an angry teenager. Like you'll walk on eggshells and not make them angry, but you're not giving them the keys to the car. You're not trusting them, right? We don't really trust them to be right. We essentially have lower expectations for them, and kind of think they're infantile, right? That you blow up and feel like you're justified to be violent against a stranger, another human being who's just walking, breathing in the same air.
Right.
You're allowed to violently assault or kill this person because of perceived slights or because of politics or because this person disagrees with your religion is not anything that we condone here in the West.
Right.
And right, we will not give you any type of respect if you can't handle that peacefully.
Right. And not only perceived slights to your person, but perceived slights to your ancestors, like people thousands of years ago who have essentially no and you see it a little bit in America now with kind of with the critical race theory concept. You see a little bit of that, need for recompense. But the truth is, there's not a person in the history of mankind that doesn't have a past where something bad happened to their family. And what's the phrase? Like an eye for an eye leaves everybody on earth blind, right? Like that's just, there's not an end to that. There's just no end. And yeah, and then right, it's like Dinosaur asked, didn't violence work for the Bundys? It does work to get attention, right? You'll be on the news, but that's as far as it goes. You're not going to further your cause. Nobody's going to go to Congress and say, you know what? Because they shot those two people at the embassy, I really think that we ought to da 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 da. That's just never going to happen.
There's no argument. There's no persuasion, and there's no. We don't esteem them. Their esteem doesn't go up. We don't want to anger them, so we may be a little bit more careful around them. But that's not the same as trust or really our minds being changed at all.
Right, exactly. You had an incident you were going to tell me about that I didn't have a chance to look at. What was that one? You sent me an Instagram, but I didn't get a chance to check it out.
Yeah, so there's a man on Instagram, so I'm using my phone right now, who I follow. Let me see if I can find him.
Sure. This will be an interesting test of our technical prowess here. Oh, that's interesting. So it freezes him. I didn't know this. So I guess it freezes you when you're off the screen looking at something else. Interesting. But anyway, yeah, let me know while he's looking for that, guys. Let me know what you guys think out there regarding the violence that's going on. I mean, it gets worse and worse lately. I mean, that guy.
So he was a leftist.
Okay.
You're going to Columbia, which is the bubble, right? The center of the bubble of the leftist intellectualism. Get a master's degree there, and he starts actually critiquing, and he sort of wakes up. He gets red pilled. Specifically about violence from the left and the condoning of violence from the left. And what he's saying is that the left supporting Palestine and this is Islamic violence is something so incompatible with them. It's mainly because they have been taught to hate the West, hate America, because we're oppressive, right? and they see Israel, who is really not a Western culture, but they're advanced. They see and they're in power that they're an oppressor, right? And whoever is an oppressor, right? We have to they see that our laws, our standards, our culture is a means of domination, and they want to overthrow it.
Right.
Well, the irony is that the ideology that they're supporting is Islam, right? Radical Islam is not a freedom, a free thing.
Right.
It is an ideology of domination.
Of course.
Right? It doesn't want queers for Palestine. It doesn't want anything to do with these ideas or values of the left at all. It wants to dominate. It doesn't want greater freedoms. It doesn't, or greater freedoms for women or anything like this. But you're supporting them like they're these noble rebels when they're not.
Right.
And that's the type of thing, and it's like you can't reconcile any of the values. He got red pill and realized all the freedoms, all the values of the West are being undermined by this just because I've got to cheer for the underdog, right? It's you're on the wrong side, and
that's the problem everywhere nowadays, right? It's like it's so Marxist, right? It's like you're either oppressor or oppressee, and that's it. It's unidimensional thing. There can't be anything else that's involved except for the power disparity between person A and person B, and you can't live your life like that. Like, I mean, literally,
well, just because somebody has power doesn't mean that they're wrong. That's the thing. Marxists likes to define and understand the world according to power. That is the essence of Marxism. You see relationships through power. But just because somebody's in power doesn't mean that it's actually a good thing that they're in power, right? And it's like everybody in power must be thrown down. You haven't really stopped to count the cost there, and that's the nearsightedness, and that's essentially what they say. They just want whoever's in power to be overthrown. And they're like, no. Like, I don't want to live under in any type of country where Hamas has the power, right?
And that's it's a shame because I'll be the first person to say that I don't agree with everything America does, right? Yeah. No country is perfect. I'll be the first person to say that we get a little imperialist sometimes. That's just mankind's nature, I think. We get a little bit interventionist, like we go out and do, one of the, unfortunately, and I'm still coming to terms with this because I don't really like interventionism, as a general rule, I like people to have their own ability to self-determine the direction of their nation. But unfortunately, I'm coming to terms with the fact that it probably is the best way to maintain hegemony, to do a little messing with, here and there in other nations, like not, hopefully
Well,
not
all
in
right. So,
in an insidious manner, but like in a way that, like, if some guy is coming to power, like, Castro or something, and he's a problem for like the entire world, yeah, maybe that person doesn't need to be in power, and maybe the CIA needs to do something about it. I don't know. I'd prefer it to be not that way. I'd prefer, like, if in a perfect world, if I could wave the magic wand and we never had to replace a would-be warlord or dictator, I would definitely be down for that. But the problem is there are these would-be warlords and dictators, and they show up with relative frequency. I mean,
well,
what
here's the thing. It's something. It started right when you're talking about in the 20th century, and it's really made the Middle East miserable.
Yeah.
From Afghanistan to, and one of the things is when you're political during the Cold War, right? The U.S. and Russia couldn't fight directly. The U.S. and China weren't fighting directly, but they would want to stifle the other person's aims, right? It seems like Russia can expand if they have this quagmire in Afghanistan.
Right.
So when Russia was in Afghanistan, we started funding the people to make that. We didn't really, all the costs were borne by the Afghanis.
Right.
We just did that because not necessarily that we wanted to win anything in Afghanistan, but to bog down Russia, and it would slow down their other things against us, right?
Right.
And that's been done right in the Middle East like crazy, like Beirut and Syria. Like, we're just going to fund the opposition just because, even if we don't think they're good guys, just because we want you to be bogged down, and we want to make this harder for you. It's kind of like in Magic, hate drafting a little bit.
Right.
So,
right.
like, it's something you don't want. You don't really care about. You just want to make it like, or in an auction, maybe for people who don't know, like in an auction, there's something that you don't want.
Right.
But somebody's bidding on it. They really want you bid them up so that they've spent all their money. So when there's something that you want, they don't have as much money to go after it, right? You're trying to spend their resources. So this became a philosophy of the CIA, well, of the KGB, of all the big powers would try to do this to their enemies. But the people that are bearing these costs in these countries have had to live through misery. Right. And so what we're seeing now is like, Israel wants to live in peace, and nobody likes the Palestinians. Yeah. But they know America wants to support Israel, so other countries, other organizations want to give money to Hamas and to create this thorn in our side, so that we're occupied with trying to fix that solution rather than do another thing.
Right. Yeah, and I mean, you can see it in the, like, in Columbia and Harvard with the protests. Like, they come over here and then they say, death to America, let's eradicate the West. And here's my thing, like, and don't get me wrong, because I can understand a certain amount of animosity, right? Mm-hmm. Nobody's gonna like everybody else like perfectly. That's fine. But you're just not gonna knock over a juggernaut like America by shooting two people or by throwing a Molotov cocktail at, like, it's like attacking a tank. Yeah, right. Yeah, I mean, you can scare some people, right? You can make people like a little bit more cautious. You can damage unfortunately, what it's done is it's eroded our confidence in our own law enforcement team and our own, like, media engine, because they're either covering it falsely or they're just not, like in Minnesota, like, it took forever for him to start addressing the Black Lives Matter riots. Like, and so it's just, you worry about, like, the way that they respond, because now it's like, oh, if this takes place in my neighborhood, does America really have my back? Does my state have my back? Does my city have my back? But aside from that, like, it's like attacking a tank with a needle, right? Like, you're just not going to make any serious dent. So maybe it's just me. I just don't understand where that philosophy comes from.
Well, it is anger, and they weapon it. So it's one thing, like, Irish used to get together to yell how much they hate the English. It was sort of this shared cultural thing. but they're doing well enough now. It's not something that leads to violence like it did even in the 80s and the 90s. Like they've sort of moved beyond that. But it was an important sort of rallying their hatred for England to bind their Irish culture. And that's a certain thing, certain minority companies or to talk about how they've been mistreated, past wrongs, but really realize, all right, but things are okay now. We're not being oppressed now. Let's kind of move on. That's something like we understand that culturally the oppression helps bind you culturally, but at least that this is our experience in the West, and we seem to be able to move on from it. These are right, but they're old feuds. They hang on to feuds in the Middle East to a way that we don't really fully appreciate. Now, I want to tell the story.
Yeah,
of experience. I think I've told you this before, but I'm trying. When I was a kid, I grew up in Los Angeles. Right, there's large populations of people from all over the world. Outside of the original countries, there's like 60 other nationalities, the highest concentration in the Los Angeles County area. So my dad took me out for pizza, and in this pizza parlor, two Middle Eastern men, I don't know exactly what they are, start having an argument at a table and start yelling at each other. And everybody starts sort of looking at them, and they're sitting down, and they're yelling, and then it escalates, and they're like, they don't care. They're the loudest thing in the restaurant. Nobody in this whole restaurant is talking. They're yelling at each other. And then they stand up and they continue yelling, top of their voices. Then they get this close to each other, spit flying out of their mouths. They're yelling with them. They're going to throw down into their fisticuffs. There's so much anger between these people, top of their voice. And then all of a sudden, they smile. They embrace. They sit down. They continue their meal, and I watched them for about a minute after that. That wasn't a hit.
You okay?
Fine. There wasn't a hint of tension in their meal. That was something that was culturally understood between them. It was a negotiation. They came to some agreement, understanding, right? And for us, right, if we'd had a shouting match like we stop it, like there's still going to be tension on what we're eating or something like. We just don't understand that. But for them, it was perfectly understood, right? And that type of interaction or something culturally understood. And so when we try to interact with them, the language they use, their emotionality, their willingness to go to what we would say would be the last resort, like the last resort. And if I get in an argument with somebody, for me to be yelling at the top of my lungs, threats of their life, and then no big deal. Let's sit down and all is forgotten. So, but we're seeing is that the left they have felt that the left and the media have given them license that their violence is permissible and okay and excused, and they're acting it out. And we need to, not just from the right, but from the left, everybody needs to say, no, Trump is acting forcefully, kicking these people out of the country and making that we're not gonna handle this anymore. But for too long under the Biden administration, the message was out that you can do this, and we'll be understanding about it. We understand, we'll let you sort of okay, that's your culture.
Right.
No, we'll be like, you're out of here.
Now, I got a couple of comments that I wanted to reach into. So Jesus says he's talking about if you really want to back law enforcement, pay working people a living wage. I'm not. So the first question I have is, are you referring to law enforcement officials themselves, like we should pay them a living wage? Because I'm not sure.
We have never said defund the police on this channel.
Yeah. I definitely I respect the police. I definitely respect their profession. So it's a hard job. Now, to be fair, I haven't had much personal success with police citizen interactions. I don't really like dealing with them. I haven't had a positive one, but
you have to interact with the police.
But yeah, the way our police force works, you're just never going to be. I mean, you're always going to see them when you don't want to, right? That's just how it works. So they're reactive, unfortunately, by nature. But Yeah, so the reason I asked later, I asked Jesus to define what he meant by a living wage and what he means by the needs that people require, is because I've heard a huge like variance between, like, some people would say, like I would say, if I wanted somebody to be taken care of, like their needs taken care of, I'm thinking food, clothing, shelter. That's it. That is all I think a person needs to survive. Now, would it be nice if they also had a private space to themselves? Yeah, that would be great. Would it be nice if they also owned a TV and a computer? Yes, that would be wonderful, but I don't consider those needs. I don't think
Yeah,
a person
it'd
needs
be
those to
nice if
survive.
they could order appetizers at every meal, right?
Right.
I mean, there's no list to the end of niceties, right?
Right. And but when I've actually looked at, some people say, like, these are the things that all humans should have, and it's a very expansive list. And I'm looking at some of those things. I'm like, I don't have that, and I'm doing okay. I'm like dead center of middle class right now. I'm like, am I feeling the pinch? Sure, I'm feeling the pinch, but I'm making it, and I'm like, I don't have one of these. What are they talking?
You're like a good hockey team to root
Right,
for.
right. Well, and it also depends on what your priorities are, right? Like, I know people that own like a $30,000 house and a $50,000 car, and I'm like, okay, you've chosen to do it that way. That's fine. Oh, and I also know, like, I have a friend that's dead broke, and like literally borrows money from me every single week. And he has like a PS5 and an Xbox One and
Well,
all the nicest gaming systems and his huge entertainment center system with surround sound speakers. And I'm like, I don't have all that nonsense. How does he get all this stuff? So
so this is why, okay, I think that the thing is, you can't just use your eyes to judge situations. So, like, one of the classic examples is a father told that he had two children, and he paid them for their chores. They got an allowance for their chores, right?
right,
One kid, as soon as he got it, would go and buy candy bars and stuff right away, and that was his priority. His other sibling, other brother, saved all that money up and bought, like a PS5 or something like that. And it was like,
right,
hey, how come he gets this? Or visually, it was like
of
he had
course,
something to show for it. He had something to show for it. And it's like, no, you got the same money. You have the same opportunity. You just chose to use it differently.
yep,
And so when we see people who are like, oh, I don't have anything, this guy's been like, look, you have better experiences along the way. You got value. It's just you can't see it now. And
right.
so it's really easy to paint a story but you don't have all the facts. But people's choices influence it, and we can't get caught up on sort of narratives like that.
Right. And the other question I would have is, I don't understand how everybody having a living wage magically would make it so that law enforcement is supported. I mean, we could very well have every single person on earth make a living wage and still have crime. It's not like crime goes away. It's not like law enforcement still either has support or doesn't, based on the political atmosphere. So that's those would be questions
Well,
for you. I
yeah,
don't know if I'm still there, but
Portland is a lot of wealthy people in Portland, and they don't like the police in Portland,
right,
right?
right. Yeah, I mean, there's a lot. So, yeah, another example of leftist violence were the assassination attempts on Trump. And by the way, there's more than two. It's probably closer to like 10, but we don't hear about the ones that get foiled very quickly, or the ones that like start in the works and then like kind of peter out or whatever. But we hear about the ones that come really, really, really close. And so, of course, Thomas Crooks and that other dude. So those were like front and center. But really, there were like four more that were right around that same time that were foiled very fast, because the Secret Service got information and they like went to visit the guy and like said, "What's up?" And that ended the whole thing. So we got to be careful about that. Now, what drives me nuts is, even when these people were obviously anti-Trump, like, you can't get any more anti-Trump than trying to kill him, right? That is the most anti-Trump that you
Pointing
can
the
get.
rifle and pulling the trigger, yeah.
And they were still trying to obfuscate that on the media. They were like trying to make it seem like, well, he did kind of, donate to this one cause, but he was registered Republican and that, and like that. And they're trying to like trying to spin rhymes. It's all sophistry. And I'm like, this is BS. This is the biggest bunch of BS. So that's where I want to take this next. I want to talk about what the media, talk about what the media does when it comes to this kind of thing, because every single time somebody on the right does anything violent, it turns into, it's a front and center thing. And then the left tries to spin it into a gun control debate. Many times it doesn't even have anything to do with guns. Like, for example, what's his name? Jamie Raskin, when talking about the Boulder, Colorado thing, was brought up gun control. I'm like, for Molotov cocktails? What gun control?
I don't think anybody thinks the laws against Molotov cocktails need to be strengthened. Or the guy who bombed that theater used pipe bombs, and it's like, the laws against pipe bombs are pretty strong. Nobody thinks they need to be stronger, right?
Which, I mean, according to your barometer or whatever, I guess pipe bombs are not something that the police ever really use on us, nor are Molotov cocktails. So we really shouldn't have those. But I mean, they're definitely. It blows my mind how this can turn into. They always try to spin it into a gun control thing the moment there's gun violence of any sort, when in reality, like, guns don't kill very many people a year, other than those who wish to die themselves. Those are the biggest group of people who die to guns in any year ever has been self-deletions. Always. It's always that. And then out of that next group, this is what drives me nuts when the left goes after guns. They always go after the AR-15. Like, if you had this whole like spectrum of gun deaths or gun violence incidents, if you took away suicides, it shrinks to like this. If you take away rifles, right, or if you take away everything other than a rifle, it shrinks to like this. You've got like maybe 100 to 200, sometimes 400 rifle related deaths. And of those rifles, most of them aren't AR-15s. Right? Like, if you took the AR-15s like completely off the map, like this, they just erase their existence, you essentially would do nothing to gun deaths. You basically wouldn't affect it at all. And I don't understand why that always becomes the narrative the moment there's some kind of.
Well, all right. It's because they did some polling, and because they look similar to AK
to like an M60, to like a real assault
military issue M16s. They found that people were scared of them, and the thing. So it's them trying to wield public thing based on optics. They realize that low information voters, people who aren't gun owners, see these and they look like a military. Hey, people walking around with military weapons, and and so that's why they put that front and center, because it looks like a civilian owned a military weapon that they don't need.
Right.
And largely they've been seen through that they haven't been successful in that, other than, that's been their approach.
Most people don't even realize this, and I'm just going to say it. It's going to go. It's going to go in one ear, out one ear for those who aren't familiar. But AR doesn't even stand for assault rifle. It stands for Armalite rifle, right? It's not an assault rifle, right? We call them assault rifles like colloquially because that's just what we say. But it's not actually an assault rifle. This is just another rifle, right? And there are actually other rifles that get better rate of fire that aren't called AR, but. Anyway, that's not the point. The point is, this is not a gun control issue. And the other thing I want to point out is, so we mentioned Molotov cocktails like 2, 3, 4, 5, I think 7 times or something like that. And Elon Musk mentioned a couple of times that the attacks on the Tesla dealerships and the individual Teslas seemed very coordinated, right? They all seem to use the same type of weaponry. They all seem to, of course, obviously they went off after the same company, the same guy, even though most of the people that own Teslas were left leaning, again, because that's where the clean energy group, went to, was for the longest time. And before Elon had political aspirations, it was like, I'll get a Tesla because that's an electric vehicle. And so these people are like attacking Teslas, seem very, very coordinated. If there is some sort of funding for that sort of if there's some sort of coordination behind that, I can only assume that it probably extends to some of the anti-Palestinian stuff, or they're reaching out to that type of group to get the other stuff done. Like, I don't know, but it seems like like Molotov cocktails are like just not. It wouldn't be my weapon of choice. Not that I would ever do anything like that, but it's just like a weird, awkward.
I feel like it's an Antifa sort of. Yeah, it's a thing that's easy to do. You can buy alcohol anywhere, light it up, and you don't have to be. It's not a sophisticated thing. It's sort of like a early training for leftists that want to. I'm a leftist and I want to start being violent. What's the first thing I can do? Oh well, let's start with this. So it's
I get. I mean,
Antifa was the first thing. All right, you're interested in leftist violence. You're going to Molotov cocktail a Tesla, right?
Welcome to the leftist violent extremism group. This is your first step. Yeah, maybe. I mean, I would hate to.
You got to level up to other things. So this is level 1. This is your new valley training area.
So here's something else I came across as I was doing my research. Right. So the Anti-Defamation League is essentially like the most common. There's several different groups that chart violent extremism, but they're probably the most common to look at for stats, right? So if you go online, you'll look at the ADL stats, and they have like these heat maps for like where violent, extremist situations have occurred. But here's something that struck me as really odd, right? Again, ADL is a very left-leaning group, and so I looked at all the way that they categorize left versus right-wing violence. Here are the different groups that the ADL has listed for right-wing extremist groups, right? You ready? White supremacy. White supremacist is a different one. I have no clue why. Neo-Nazi, which to me sounds like the other two, right? Anti-government, which can be both left and right-wing, but it's only listed on the right-wing side. Other and political unknown. That was like 6 right-wing groups designated for extremism violence. You know how many were on the left wing? 1. Islamist. That was it. Islamist left wing violence.
Not Antifa, nothing.
Not Antifa, not communist, nothing. There was not left wing other, not left wing anti-government, there was just nothing there. It was just one group. And of course, if you start digging through their stats, they look like it's like that too. Like it'll tell you that there's all these like right wing situations, and then I'm like, when I started like looking at it, I'm like, okay, well, where are the Black Lives Matter riots in this list? Because they're not in here. And they're like, oh, you're right. It's not in there. Like the AI is talking to me. It's like, yeah, you're right. They just don't put that in there. I'm like, well, why not? And then I like listed about another 20 incidents that are just not in there. So I'm trying to figure out, why are they hiding it? Like, what? Why is this? It drives me nuts, and I can't understand why we would, as people, why are we accepting that this is just like that? We have these stats, quote unquote, generated by the one side who's covering their own tracks. So let's take a look at some of the comments here. They're going, all right. Larry Dickman says, yeah, they never talk about gun control when it's black on black crime. That's very true. They try to steer clear of any kind of like gang violence because they don't want to alienate their political ally. That's the same reason that they didn't try to, to address the Black Lives Matter riots very quickly, because they're like in a catch-22. If they come down hard, they're coming down hard on their own political allies.
Yeah.
And
well, here's the thing. Yeah. Oh, sorry. I want to know. Dickman Larry, he says, even though EVs are the worst cars when it comes to damaging the environment, here's the core issue, right? So even if they're not good for the environment, why do you try and have an EV? To virtue signal.
Yep.
Right? So everybody knows you're on the left. Right, to send a certain message to people that you care about the environment. Not, even if it's worse than environment, it's understood as a virtue signaling message, right? And so when all of a sudden Elon was associated with right wing and your message was not saying what you thought you wanted to say, that's why, right, people were reacting and trying to torch, doing the things. And throwing a Molotov cocktail was a virtue signal.
Yeah.
Right? As a way for me to virtue signal that I reject Elon Musk's current political feelings. Elon Musk is an individual, can change his mind, right? Obviously, he has changed his mind about Trump and spending. Nobody's clawing back to say, "I love Elon," I take it back. I want to buy his cars. Virtue signaling or signaling, right, what they feel like what the elites want them to do. Right.
Yep.
So always think about, what do the elites want? Why do the elites want this? Why do the common man need to care about this? Because they want, the common man just wants to live in peace.
That's
and
it.
really right-wing groups do too. And they're concerned about that the immigrants that we're bringing in here are not assimilating because we're bringing in them in such large numbers, and that their communities are more prone to violence. And we're not clamping down on it fast enough and teaching them and showing them by example that violence is not something that you do here. Right? Maybe you get violent back wherever you used to. That's what you did in Beirut or Syria, but it's not what you do in Omaha, Nebraska, or Boulder, Colorado. Right? And only sort of jackbooted, like maybe even overreacting, because these are antisocial acts. They're not just criminals, not just the violence. It's an antisocial act that's trying to undermine public safety.
Yep.
An overreaction as far as that, and sending clear message. It's not tolerated in the West, and these are the things that Europe is slowly trying to come to grips with. Right, the French are saying, "Look, we just want to live in peace, but there's going to be these groups that these foreigners that have come in do not want to live in peace, and so for us to achieve peace, we're going to have to go through a period of intense conflict until they realize that peace is the only thing we will accept here. Live in peace or get out."
Right. And I think we're facing it, at least not to the same extent France is, but we're facing a little bit of a need for a purge of sorts here in America too, which is everybody's throwing up all these like walls against Trump when he's trying to deport people, but it's like, if you've got somebody here on a student visa, they're basically on loan, and if they're here saying, "I want to eradicate the West," then that's just not the kind of person we want in our nation. I'm sorry. Like, don't get me wrong.
I mean,
happy to take somebody on if they're not saying stuff like that. Happy to, right? Like, if they come in and they say, "We'd love to, our last nation didn't work out. That's why we moved to the greatest nation on earth." I'm like, welcome aboard. Have a night, like, come on in. Let's go out and eat. Let's say, But if you're coming in, you're saying, "Let's do it, America," and I'm like, bye.
And I don't think that's crazy, especially like when you have people like Soleiman, the Colorado attacker. He was overstayed a visa. He was here legally, but fell with impunity. Nothing was going to happen to him. But they immediately, him and his whole family, boom, they're out. I mean, he's going to be, and and this is the type of thing that we need to be really on top of. And I think the Marco Rubio is really making sure we don't import students, we don't import people who are coming here to do that, especially if they're going to go to universities that already teach Americans to hate America. We don't need you to teach Middle Easterners to hate America. Thank you very much.
Right. And we need the universities to police themselves. Like this, they shouldn't be letting these groups. Don't get me wrong, people can protest. I have no problem with protesting, but they shouldn't be letting people like terrorize other Jewish students and like, keep them from going to class and like running them around. Like, that's ridiculous. That's ridiculous.
Common sense.
Exactly. So here's something else I wanted to talk about too. And maybe this is a shift that's taken place over time, but I feel like, and tell me if I'm wrong, I feel like every time the right does something stupid, right? Like anytime the right has one of those violent extremist situations, everybody on the right says, "Yeah, that guy was a jerk. Like, why did he, like even the people like from January 6th, which gets brought up over and over again, I'm the first to tell you, like, yeah, those guys are idiots. They should never have run past the barricade. They're morons, right? I denounce violence. That's it. No equivocations. I denounce violence." Now, when the left does it, it's always like, "I denounce violence, but." Every time I hear it, it's like, "Well, I denounce violence, but you can only push people so far before they go out and kill the health insurance CEO." right? Like, or I denounce violence, but but Trump is a constitutional existential threat. And so, of course, it's like, or I denounce violence, but
Well,
Destiny, for Christ's sake, Destiny didn't even denounce it at all. He's like, yeah, we should keep trying to, like, what in the world?
right. When I say, look, when we're trying to attack, Israel's trying to attack and kill Hamas, the militant and government wing there, right?
That's
Hamas
it.
chose not to attack military targets or even government buildings. They chose to attack a bunch of people attending a concert in a field, civilians.
Right.
And they want to use civilians. Hamas wants to use their own civilians as human shields, so the casualties. But they feel any of those casualties that they invite systemically justify any of their violence otherwise. And that nobody's saying, like, look, you attacked peaceful people in a field having a concert.
What did you expect would happen?
Would and you, right? And when we're trying to kill, if you just go away, we're trying to kill your legitimate soldiers. If they put on uniforms, we would know who to shoot at. They don't want to put on uniforms because they want you to die.
Right.
And so, but the disconnect, the left has made this open because they haven't condemned, right? And so many of them, because they both vote Democrat, Palestinians and the leftists, they don't want to come out because they want those votes. And they need to come in and say, this is un-American. This is, you make your case through persuasion, long suffering through ideas, not through Molotov cocktails.
Exactly, right? Is that so difficult? And all right, so in Israel, like the media is the same. It's like, when Israelis commit any kind of act of violence, even if it's violent, like against a targeted, combatant, right? It's like, we all denounce the violence from Israel, but anytime it's the Palestinians, it's like, well, but they have, and so why are we equivocating? It drives me nuts. And the Israelis are now like, it's crazy because for the longest time, even the UN and everybody was saying like, oh, the Israelis are starving them. And no, do you know how much food Israel pumps into Gaza every single week? It's something like, I don't know, it's outrageous. It's like an outrageous amount of food, more than enough to feed every man, woman, and child in that entire zone. But what happens is Hamas steals the food and then sells it to their own people at exorbitant rates they can't afford because they've got no way to earn a living in a demolished, war zone. And then they use the money to make more weapons to fight against Israel. And I'm like, guys, what are we doing here?
Well, that was one of the things too, is there was an aid station set up that Hamas wasn't able to control. And so there was, false things come up. So there have been some aid stations where they can get the stuff right too. And the people there are actually appreciative. They'll say positive things about America and things like that. But Hamas wants to control, right? By controlling that, they control, who gets the food, and so nobody will say anything negative against them. Hamas really, and this is what Israel says, is that there are people in Gaza that want to live in peace. And the only chance for them to happen is Hamas has to cease to exist.
Yes.
And Hamas will not, right? They keep getting cover from the media and the elites, right? When they don't turn over hostages, when they refuse to surrender, when they don't respect the right of conquest and violence. Well, they want more violence. And so this is what they have chosen. And so we need to just see it played out. And anybody so anybody who just has a pro view like that, that's just sort of my simple common man take, isn't deserving of violence.
Right.
Anybody says hostages should be released,
right,
is not trying to condone every single action, every single bullet is perfect in Israel. Nobody's saying that.
Thank you. Right. And I it drives, like, the fact that there are still hostages at all at this point, like, it, I just like it doesn't matter. It almost doesn't even matter how many people are there right now that don't want to fight. Like at that point, if you've got hostages still, you obviously still want to fight, right? Like as a nation, and it's a shame that it's like this huge divide between the normal citizenry and the combatant force. And you know, Israel's doing a good job now of making these food stations that are like they're basically separated Gaza into two different parts. You know, one with like, you know, look, here's where all the civilians can come and get food, get aid, you know, and the rest is for Hamas. So if you want to be Hamas, you gotta, you know, back out into your own zone. If you want to come up here, we're gonna defend this zone and protect it and give out food, whether you like it or not, for free, you know. And so that's a good like at least it's a good try to like kind of divide the groups and like so you can target the combatant force. But man, they're just, you know, there's I don't know what else, you know, they can do. Like everybody you know comes in and says, you know, oh, Israel's doing this wrong and this wrong and this wrong and this wrong, and I'm like, all right, what would you do? And they're like, uh not that. And I'm like, okay, but what?
The Gazan citizens that want to live in peace and don't want to live under Hamas are going to need to leave Gaza until the war is over, until Hamas is moved out. They need to move and live in a refugee camp somewhere, maybe on the Red Sea in South Sudan, maybe in the West Bank, right? But until everybody that doesn't want to support Hamas needs to go to a new refugee camp, wait out this war, not in Gaza, and so that only Hamas is left and the people that support Hamas, and then let's have it out. If you want to live in peace, get out of Gaza.
Simple as that. Yeah. And I mean, same thing here. Like I wish, you know, if you want to live in peace, come on to America. If not, don't come to America, right? Like this is not the place to bring your violence. You're gonna get stuff, especially with the current administration, right? Like Dan Bongino is on it, like and Kash Patel, they're on it. They're picking up people like tiddlywinks, like they're just like snatching them up.
Yeah,
you know,
and Rubio too. Rubio too is on.
Yeah. Yeah, didn't they just? I think they had that raid or whatever just the other day that was like 72 people and like, you know, 50 of them were like convicted criminals already that should have been sent back and weren't, you know. And it's like, and some of them were like really bad, like, you know, rape victims and you know, all or rapists and murderers and all that stuff. I'm like, come on, like, what are we doing? Like, this is an obvious like, what are we doing? You know. So thankfully, we have a new administration, new sheriff in town, and they're on it. But anyway, that's pretty much all I had for you guys today. Please like, share, and subscribe. Please continue to watch our long content because we need more. We always need more feedback on that. Please let us know if you have any suggestions and or concerns about the channel. I got a new marketing agent to help out with some of the marketing. So hopefully we'll be monetized here soon, and hopefully we'll be able to reach a greater visibility in the near future. So pray for us if you're out there, and catch you next time on Common Mansplaining.
Yep, the common sense will prevail.
Amen.